His husband returned after 3 years abroad, bringing with him his mistress and a child. She silently handed him the divorce papers and left with her secret fortune. For 3 years of waiting, Ava believed he would return covered in glory. But the day Ethan Thorne arrived, it was to bring his mistress and his child into the home they had once dreamed of together. She did not cry, she did not reproach him, she simply placed a divorce petition and the apartment's deed on the table. No one knew that the woman they criticized for being a mere kept woman was, in reality, the mysterious founder of Crimson Thread, a luxury high-fashion brand. She possessed a fortune capable of shaking the entire city of New York. The night he betrayed her was also the night she was reborn, abandoning the past with a serene smile and a wealth the entire world would admire. Ava Sterling looked at the clock on the wall. It was 7 p.m. The aroma of braised prime beef short ribs with red wine reduction, Ethan's favorite dish, permeated the apartment. On the table, a bowl of creamy clam chowder still steamed. Beside it, perfectly presented sautéed broccoli with garlic and crispy prosciutto. Everything was perfect, like the love she had painstakingly cultivated for years. 3 years, 1,095 days, since Ethan had left for San Francisco to pursue what he called the project of the century, and 1,095 nights she had waited alone in that spacious apartment for his rushed phone calls. He said that this project would be the launchpad for him to become the most prestigious senior partner architect in New York, so that she could live a life of opulence without worry. She believed him, just as she had always believed in their love since their college days. She got up and walked toward the large window, contemplating the bustling traffic of Park Avenue. The neon lights reflected on her delicate face, a face that showed subtle signs of fatigue from waiting, but could not hide its tenderness. During those 3 years, she had grown accustomed to doing everything alone, fixing leaks, changing light bulbs, going to the hospital alone when she was sick. She had gone from being a pampered young woman to a fiercely independent one, but deep in her heart, she still longed for the warmth of his embrace. Today, he was coming home. A week earlier, he had called her in an unusually cheerful tone to announce that the project had concluded with resounding success, that he would be promoted and transferred back to the headquarters. "I'm coming home." Those 3 simple words had made her heart tremble. She had spent a week cleaning the house, hand-washing all the bedding, and today she had spent the entire afternoon in the kitchen preparing his favorite dishes. The doorbell rang, interrupting her thoughts. Her heart skipped a beat. It was him. She took a deep breath, trying to contain the emotion that overwhelmed her, and hurried to open the door. She wanted to greet him with her most radiant smile, with the warmest embrace. The door opened. Ethan stood there, with his tall figure and his familiar angular face, but the look he gave her was strange, evasive. He wore an expensive suit, looking much more mature and successful than 3 years ago. But Ava's attention did not linger on him for long, because standing right behind him was another woman, a woman with an oval face and large round eyes, with a fragile and pitiful appearance. She wore an immaculate white dress. And what left Ava petrified was that in the arms of that woman was a small child. The boy, about 2 years old, was sleeping soundly, and his features bore an astonishing resemblance to Ethan's. Time seemed to stand still. The warm atmosphere of the home instantly turned icy. Not even the delicious aroma of the food could mask the stench of betrayal that now permeated the air. Ethan cleared his throat, breaking the oppressive silence. He stepped into the house without looking her directly in the eyes. "Ava, this is Chelsea Miller, and this is Jake, my son." Ava said nothing. Her gaze drifted from the stranger's face to the sleeping child. "My son," 4 words that felt like 4 daggers plunging into her heart. 3 years of waiting in exchange for another woman and a secret child. Chelsea lowered her head, her voice trembling and heavy with supposed guilt. "Mrs. Sterling, I'm sorry. I didn't want to destroy your family." Ethan frowned and pulled Chelsea behind him in a protective gesture. "You don't have to apologize. The fault is mine, Ava. I know this is sudden, but Chelsea has sacrificed a lot for me these 3 years in San Francisco. She has been the one who understood and supported my career, and the child needs to be acknowledged. From now on, they will live here. I hope you can understand me." He delivered a long speech where every word was an excuse for himself and a complete nullification of her sacrifices. He expected her to understand. He thought she would cry, make a scene, or be jealous like any other woman. But Ava did none of that. Her composure baffled Ethan. There were no tears, no reproaches. She just looked at him in silence with a gaze as deep and serene as an autumn lake. That look made Ethan feel guilty while Chelsea unconsciously tightened her grip on the child in her arms. Then Ava turned around slowly and headed toward the bedroom. Ethan and Chelsea looked at each other, and a flash of triumph mixed with disdain appeared in their eyes. They believed she had accepted her fate, that a simple, jobless housewife had no choice but to endure it. But they were wrong. Minutes later, Ava came out. In her hands, she carried neither a knife nor a suitcase but a blue folder. She approached the coffee table and set it down gently. Her voice, clear and cold, echoed in the silence. "Here is the divorce petition. I have already signed it." She looked up and stared directly into Ethan's stupefied face before uttering a final phrase, articulating every syllable. "Sign it and get out of my house." Silence took over the living room. Ethan stared intently at the folder on the table, then at Ava's expressionless face, as if trying to process if he had heard correctly. "Get out of my house." A surge of anger replaced his initial stupefaction. He felt his masculine pride trampled. "Ava, what game are you playing?" he snapped, his tone mixing rage and mockery. "Who do you think you are to kick me out? Look at yourself. You've been home for 3 years doing nothing. Everything in this house, from a toothpick to the sofa, this luxurious life, I earned it with my hard work. Divorce? How are you going to live?" His words struck Ava's memories, making her relive images of the past. That day, under the shade trees on the university campus, young Ethan, in his white shirt, had taken her hand and, with eyes shining with illusion, told her, "Ava, someday I'll be a great architect. I'll build you the most beautiful house in the world, and we'll have a happy family." Ava was then the star of the fashion design school. Her creations left professors speechless. She had a promising future. The big firms vied for her even before graduation. But for Ethan's promise, for the love she felt for him, she gave it all up. She rejected tempting offers and agreed to stay in the background, becoming his unconditional support so he could focus on his career. She believed her sacrifice was worthwhile. The day he was offered the position in San Francisco, he hugged her tightly and promised, "Wait for me, just 3 years, only 3. When I return, I'll make it all up to you." The first year, he called her daily, telling her about the difficulties and pressures of being in a new city. She listened patiently, comforted, and encouraged him. The second year, calls spaced out to a few a week. He said he was too busy, that meetings dragged on until dawn, and he didn't want to wake her. Instead, he started sending her expensive gifts, designer handbags, diamond jewelry, but Ava never used them. What she needed was his attention, not inanimate objects. In the third year, calls could be counted on one hand, each with barely a few superficial questions. His voice became increasingly distant. Feminine intuition told her something was wrong. She had deluded herself into thinking he was just too focused on work, but deep down, a crack had begun to open in her heart. She had contemplated the worst-case scenario, and that divorce petition was her preparation for this day. What she didn't expect was that it would arrive in such a cruel and brazen manner. The torrent of memories stopped. Ava returned to reality and looked at the man in front of her, the one she had once loved with all her soul. There was no longer pain in her gaze, only a slight irony. She did not argue with him about money. Words were now superfluous. She silently walked to a wooden dresser in a corner of the living room. She opened a drawer and took out another plastic-protected folder. She returned and placed it on top of the divorce petition. "You're right," she said with the same calm. "Everything in this house was bought with money, but not yours." Ethan frowned, confused. "What nonsense are you talking about?" Ava did not answer. She simply pushed the folder toward him with her long, slender finger. "Open it and see." Ethan, skeptical yet curious, took it. Inside was a document slightly yellowed by time. As he read the header, his pupils contracted. It was the deed of the property. The address listed was that of this very apartment, but what left him breathless was the owner's name. There was only one, clearly printed, Ava Sterling. And in the bottom corner, the registration date, June 15, 7 years ago. The day before they got married, Ethan stood rigid as a statue. This apartment, which he had always been proud of as the fruit of his efforts, which he boasted about to his friends, the basis upon which he demanded her submission, had been her property since before the marriage. Legally, it was a separate asset. He had no right to it. He raised his head abruptly, looking at her with disbelief. All the arrogance, anger, and self-satisfaction vanished from his face, leaving only bewilderment and absolute shock. He opened his mouth to say something, but his throat seemed to be clamped by an invisible hand. He couldn't utter a single sound. The room fell into a dead silence. The deed lay on the table like a silent accusation of Ethan's arrogance. His face went from white to green. Confusion and humiliation were evident in his gaze. At that moment, Chelsea, who had remained silent behind Ethan, burst into tears. Her tears rolled down her cheeks. Her pathetic sobbing broke the tense atmosphere. She stepped forward, looking at Ava with tear-filled eyes. "Mrs. Sterling, I know it's all my fault. I don't ask for your forgiveness, nor do I want to destroy your family. I just hope. My son, Jake, he is innocent. He needs his father. We only ask for a small corner in this house to take care of him. I don't need any official recognition. I beg you, have pity on the child. The performance was impeccable. Every word, every gesture, distilled calculated vulnerability, as if she were the biggest victim." Ethan, as if waking from a trance, used Chelsea's drama as an excuse to regain his composure and unleash his fury. He abruptly pushed her aside and yelled at Ava in a condescending voice, "Ava, don't be so cruel. See? Chelsea is being incredibly humble. She's just asking for a place for my son. Do you really have to be so ruthless? Don't think that just because you own this apartment you have everything. When we divorce, what will you live on? A woman without a job who for years has only known how to cook and clean. Do you think life out there is easy? Without my financial help, you won't even have money for 3 meals a day." His wounded pride made his words increasingly hurtful. He had completely forgotten the years of marriage. Only contempt remained for the woman he believed was dependent on him. Ava was not angry. She found it ridiculous. Slowly, she looked up. Her gaze, sharp as a knife, swept across Ethan's indignant face and stopped at the sobbing Chelsea. Without saying a word, she turned and walked toward the bedroom they shared. Ethan thought his words had hurt her and that she was going to cry. A cold smile appeared on his lips, but once again, he was wrong. Ava opened the large closet, pointing to the left side where a few of her clothes hung. They were all neutral colors, simple designs, ordinary fabrics, some even worn out. Their total value probably did not cover the cost of one of Ethan's dinners at a luxury restaurant. Then she abruptly opened the right side. A completely different world appeared. Dozens of designer suits, perfectly ironed shirts, silk ties of every color meticulously arranged. Below, gleaming leather shoes, and a box with several limited edition watches that shone. His entire wardrobe smelled of money and luxury. Ava turned and looked him directly in the eyes. Her voice was not loud, but every word was like a hammer blow to his chest. "Ethan, in 3 years, apart from the money for basic expenses you sent me every month, I haven't spent a single one of your cents on myself. Look at my clothes. Do you see anything of value? And you? These suits, these watches, who bought them for you with your money? I have no right to ask. But by what right do you talk to me about finances?" Her words left him speechless, his face flushed with rage and shame. It was true. He always sent her a fixed amount, barely enough for bills and basic groceries. Meanwhile, he squandered money on luxuries to build his image as a successful architect. He never thought Ava would notice. Just then, his phone rang. He grabbed it as if it were a lifesaver. It was his mother. As soon as he answered, the woman's shrill voice boomed. "Ethan, son, I heard you're back. That Ava is making things difficult for you. Son, it's normal for a man to have his adventures. As a wife, she should be more understanding for everyone's sake. Tell her that if she behaves, the Thorne family won't treat her badly. After all, that child is my grandson." Before he could respond, Ava snatched the phone. She put it to her ear. Her voice was icy. "Mrs. Thorne, don't worry. Your precious son and your grandson, I don't need either of them. We will resolve our matters ourselves." With that, without waiting for a reply, she hung up abruptly. She threw the phone back at him. Her gaze no longer contained a hint of affection. The atmosphere in the apartment became dense, almost unbreathable. His mother-in-law's call was the last straw for Ava's patience. She didn't want to waste another second in that place with those people. She took out her own mobile and dialed a familiar number. "Kara Reed Law Office." "Hello? Kara." "It's me. Ava Sterling," Ava said briefly in a calm tone that brooked no argument. "Serve the papers to Ethan Thorne. Initiate all proceedings as quickly as possible." "Understood." "Understood," the voice on the other end replied. The call ended quickly. Ava put away her phone and, without deigning to look at the two figures petrified in the living room, headed directly to the bedroom. The sound of a suitcase opening and drawers closing was heard. Ethan and Chelsea looked at each other. Chelsea, looking worried, tugged at Ethan's sleeve. "Ethan, what is she going to do?" "She's putting on a show," Ethan snorted, regaining confidence. "What else can she do? She's just threatening. I don't believe she's actually leaving." "If she leaves here, where would she go? To friends or back to her hometown?" A woman accustomed to living well, as soon as she spends a couple of days in hardship, she'll come back begging. Chelsea found this logical. Her gaze toward the bedroom filled with a flicker of smugness and disdain. True, a housewife of so many years, without money or power. How long could she maintain that facade of toughness? A few moments later, Ava emerged from the bedroom, pulling a small suitcase. It was a 20-inch carry-on and seemed very light. She had changed her clothes. She wore simple jeans and a white t-shirt with her long hair pulled back in a ponytail. She did not look like a woman whose husband had just betrayed her, but a college student preparing for a short trip. She took nothing that belonged to Ethan, not the expensive jewelry he had sent her. She only carried what was truly hers. She dragged the suitcase straight to the door, without looking back even once. The sumptuous dinner was still warm on the table, but for her at that moment, it was nothing more than a bitter mockery. When her hand rested on the doorknob, Ethan said with an air of superiority, "Think carefully. When your tantrum is over and you reflect, come back. I'll still give you a chance." Ava did not answer. Only a faint, almost imperceptible smile played on her lips. A chance. He still didn't understand that the one who needed a chance was not her. Click. The door closed, separating two worlds. Inside, Ethan and Chelsea looked at each other and smiled. They believed the drama was over and that they were the victors. Outside, Ava entered the elevator with a straight back, without the slightest hesitation. When the elevator reached the ground floor, she stepped out of the luxury apartment building where she had lived for years. The night wind of New York blew, bringing with it a slight chill. She did not call a taxi nor head to the bus stop. She simply stood silently by the curb. Less than a minute later, a black Bentley silently pulled up right in front of her. The back door opened, and a chauffeur in an impeccable uniform stepped out and bowed respectfully. "Miss Ava, please get in the car." The chauffeur took the small suitcase from her hand and carefully placed it in the trunk. Ava said nothing, just nodded slightly and settled into the luxurious back seat. The car door closed softly, isolating her from the noisy outside world. The car slid silently, merging with the dense traffic. It did not head toward the downtown area or modest residential areas. It turned onto a tree-lined street toward the Upper East Side, the most exclusive and expensive mansion area in New York, where every square foot was worth its weight in gold. Finally, the car stopped at the gate of a classic European-style mansion. The elaborate wrought iron gate opened automatically, and the car entered a courtyard with a meticulously maintained garden. Ava got out of the car and took a deep breath of the fresh air. This was her real home. The heavy wooden door of the mansion opened. An elderly housekeeper was already waiting for her. "Welcome home, miss," she said with a kind smile. This was not only Ava Sterling's home but also her studio, the place where priceless works of art were born, the secret refuge of the name that made the world of fashion and art tremble, Crimson Thread. 3 days after Ava left, Ethan received an envelope from the court. He tore it open roughly, glanced at the summons and the official divorce petition sent by the attorney, and a mocking smile played on his lips. He thought Ava was just angry that after a few days of hardship she would return on her own. He didn't expect her to take it so seriously as to hire a lawyer. So what? A housewife of so many years, with no source of income, what was she going to fight him with? At most, he would give her a small settlement as charity and quickly settle the matter. With this superior attitude, Ethan called his attorney, a Mr. Wallace, a divorce specialist. He confidently informed him that he would attend the first meeting to see what tricks his ex-wife would pull. Kara Reed Law Office was on the 35th floor of a skyscraper in the heart of the financial district. The gleaming glass and the minimalist but luxurious interior exuded an air of professionalism and exclusivity. Ethan and his attorney entered. The luxury of the place reinforced his belief that Ava had only borrowed money to put on appearances. In the meeting room, a woman in her mid-30s was already waiting for them. She wore a perfectly tailored gray suit, her hair pulled back in a neat bun, light makeup, but an incredibly sharp gaze. It was Kara Reed, Ava Sterling's attorney. Kara nodded courteously. She invited them to sit down without another word. Attorney Wallace took the lead with a somewhat condescending tone. "Miss Reed, we have received Mrs. Sterling's petition. My client, Mr. Thorne, values emotional ties very much. He doesn't want things to get ugly. As for the division of assets, we both know that Mrs. Sterling has not worked in years, and all her expenses have depended on Mr. Thorne. In consideration of the years of marriage, Mr. Thorne of Marriage Bela Bay Crete, by part cried com. Thorne agrees to give her a sufficient stipend so that she can rent an apartment and find a new job." Kara Reed listened in silence, tapping her long fingers on the table. When Attorney Wallace finished, she spoke calmly. "Mr. Wallace, I believe there is a misunderstanding. My client, Mrs. Sterling, is not requesting any spousal support from Mr. Thorne." Wallace and Ethan exchanged looks of surprise and mockery. No alimony? Was she planning to leave empty-handed? Kara continued in a firm voice. "Our demands are very simple. First, immediate divorce based on the evidence of Mr. Thorne's adultery, which is irrefutable." She slid a folder of photos toward them. The photos showed Ethan and Chelsea in intimate situations in San Francisco. There were even photos of them with little Jake entering and leaving a luxury apartment complex. Ethan's face changed slightly. He hadn't expected Ava to have that. "Second," Kara continued, regarding assets. "The Fifth Avenue apartment is my client's separate property, acquired before the marriage, so there is nothing to discuss. However, during the marriage, Mr. Thorne's income is considered marital property. We demand an equitable division according to the law." Attorney Wallace let out a laugh. "Miss Reed, you must be joking, right? Mr. Thorne's income is indeed marital property, but Mrs. Sterling has also lived off that money for years. If it is divided in half, there won't be much left for her. Mrs. Sterling should be more realistic. Accepting spousal support is more beneficial for her." Ethan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, with an expression of triumph. He watched Kara with amusement, waiting to see how she would continue with this farce. Kara did not flinch. She looked directly at Attorney Wallace, an almost imperceptible smile playing on her lips. "Then, let's talk realistically." She leaned down to open the briefcase beside her and pulled out another dossier, much thicker than the one with the photos. She placed it gently on the table and pushed it toward Ethan. "Mr. Thorne, you say my client depended on you to live, correct? Then please take a look at this." Ethan frowned and took the dossier with curiosity. The first page was a bank statement. His eyes quickly scanned the figures until they reached the final balance. The number wasn't long, but it made his pupils instantly contract. 8 zeros. He quickly turned the page. It was another bank statement, another astronomical figure. He kept turning pages. His hands began to tremble. Credit card statements, bond investments, stocks. Every page was a visual blow. But that wasn't all. Below were a series of property deeds, a duplex in Greenwich Village, a commercial space in Soho, even a villa in the Hamptons, all in Ava Sterling's name. Finally, what destroyed him completely was a document about business ownership. Ava Sterling owned 70% of a company called Crimson Thread. Crimson Thread. The name sounded familiar. He had heard his partner's wives mention it. A high-fashion brand specializing in extremely expensive and hard-to-get hand-embroidered silk products, a symbol of high society. The room fell into absolute silence. Attorney Wallace, beside him, was also petrified, mouth open. Ethan felt the blood freeze in his veins. His breathing became agitated. He looked up at Kara with a look of disbelief mixed with bewilderment, rage, and a deep, invisible fear. The woman he had always despised, the one he believed only knew how to cook and clean, the one he was convinced couldn't live without him, was a magnate in the shadows. The plot twist was so sudden, so brutal, that it caught him completely off guard. While Ethan was suffering a psychological earthquake in the law office, Ava was in a completely different world. Her classic mansion was not just a place to live. The second and third floors had been transformed into an exquisite design and craftsmanship studio. Here, there was no smell of cooking oil, but the subtle aroma of sandalwood and the characteristic scent of the highest quality silks. The morning sunlight streamed through the large French windows, illuminating shelves stacked with embroidery threads of all colors, shining like a rainbow. Ava was no longer wearing simple housewife clothes. She wore an elegant, smoky blue designer silk dress, the soft fabric clinging to her slender yet curvy figure. Her long hair was casually tied up with a wooden pin, exposing her slender and elegant neck. She didn't wear elaborate makeup, but the aura she emanated was captivating. It was a mixture of the classic elegance of an artist and the confidence and determination of a leader. She stood before a large embroidery frame, her hands moving deftly, guiding the needle over a background of black silk. Under her fingers, a fire phoenix was taking shape. Each feather looked incredibly real, radiating a golden sheen. Her concentration made everything around her seem to stop. A young woman, her assistant named Anna, entered silently with a tablet in her hand. "Ava, sorry to interrupt, but a very important collaboration proposal just arrived." Anna didn't dare call her director or boss. Everyone here respectfully called her Ava, a close address that still maintained due reverence. Ava stopped her hand, but her eyes did not leave the work. "From whom?" "From the Sterling Group, one of the leading luxury real estate and art investment conglomerates. They say their CEO, Mr. Richard Monroe, greatly admires the works of Crimson Thread." Ava had heard of the Sterling Group. They were a significant force in the New York business world, known for their projects with a strong artistic component and extremely high aesthetic standards. Anna continued her report. "They are about to inaugurate a new commercial and art center called the Sterling Center. They hope to personally invite the founder of Crimson Thread to collaborate on the design of an exclusive silk embroidery art exhibition space in the main lobby. They say it will be the most prominent element of the entire project." It was an invitation of enormous weight. The Sterling Center was expected to become a new New York icon. If Crimson Thread's works were exhibited in such a central location, the brand's fame would skyrocket. Ava reflected for a moment. Over the past 3 years, to dedicate time to her small family, she had rejected many large projects, accepting only private commissions to keep the studio running. She had hidden behind the name Crimson Thread for so long that she had almost forgotten the great ambitions she once had. Now she was free, unburdened, and unattached. Perhaps it was time for Crimson Thread to truly shine. She turned to Anna, her gaze calm but firm. "Tell them we accept the meeting. Arrange an appointment for me with their CEO, Mr. Monroe." Anna nodded happily and immediately withdrew to carry out the order. Ava returned to the frame, her fingers gently caressing the splendid feathers of the phoenix. The phoenix rises from its ashes. Perhaps that was also her destiny. The shipwreck of her marriage had not destroyed her. It had only made her stronger and more radiant. Her gaze went toward the window, toward the New York skyscrapers. Her future, and that of Crimson Thread, began here and now. After Ava left, Chelsea Miller could finally enter the apartment as the new lady of the house. She spent the first day touring every room, meticulously erasing any trace of the other woman. She threw away the set of pale blue sheets that Ava loved and replaced them with provocative, intense red ones. The small, delicate potted plants on the balcony were replaced by ostentatious bouquets of roses. She even bought a series of expensive abstract paintings to hang on the walls, trying to impose a completely different style, a style that belonged to Chelsea Miller. Each change was carefully photographed and posted on her Instagram profile using phrases full of innuendo. Next to a photo of a romantic candlelit dinner, she wrote, "Happiness sometimes takes time to arrive, but if it's the right person, the wait is worth it." Below a photo of little Jake playing on the new sofa, she added, "My son finally has a complete home. Where there is love, there is home." Each post was like an invisible needle, calculated to wound Ava's heart. Chelsea imagined Ava somewhere, perhaps in a dingy rental apartment, looking at those images with a heart broken by pain and jealousy. She hoped for a reaction, an insult, or at least a sign that her opponent was suffering, but she was disappointed. Ava Sterling's profile was completely silent. Her profile picture was still that of a white magnolia. Her last post was half a year ago. She seemed to have evaporated from the virtual world, completely ignoring Chelsea's provocations. This silence made Chelsea feel like she was hitting a frustrating, useless cotton bag. She didn't understand how Ava could be so calm. Meanwhile, in the college alumni WhatsApp group, her story had become the hottest topic of conversation. A friend with the nickname Lazy Kitten was the first to speak. "Guys, have you heard? Ethan brought the mistress and a son home. Ava left. Poor Ava, so many years sacrificing herself for him, only to end up like this." Another, probably a friend of Ethan's, came to his defense. "Matters of the heart are complicated. Ethan was alone in San Francisco, working hard for 3 years. It's normal for a man away from his wife to have a moment of weakness," someone immediately retorted. "A moment of weakness that produces a 2-year-old child? Who does he think Ava is?" The discussion heated up. Some felt sorry for Ava. Others insinuated that she didn't know how to keep her husband. A woman who is too good and only dedicates herself to the house is destined to be abandoned. What century is she living in, depending on a man? Look at her now. She must be having a terrible time. Chelsea read every comment. She felt satisfied when they spoke ill of Ava, but was angry that many still took her side. Ava's presence, though absent, remained a shadow hanging over her life. She turned to Ethan, who was sitting on the sofa with a frown, and said in a sweet voice, "Honey, why don't you call her and talk to her? Her silence worries me." But Ethan, who had just returned from the law office, was in a foul mood. He pushed her hand away abruptly. "Worried about what? She's just pretending to be a martyr. Stop worrying about her." Seeing Ethan's unusually hostile attitude, Chelsea dared not say more. She had to swallow her frustration. She didn't know that in Ethan's mind, her existence and that of the child were no longer important. His mind was completely absorbed by Ava Sterling's immense and secret fortune. For Chelsea, Ava's silence was contempt. She didn't realize it was the most powerful weapon, because when someone stops caring about you, all provocations become useless. Ethan left the skyscraper building in a state of total confusion. The figures in the statements, the addresses of the luxury properties, and the 2 words crimson thread danced incessantly in his head, creating inescapable chaos. Upon reaching the apartment, he locked himself in his study, ignoring the knocking of a worried Chelsea at the door. His first reaction was not regret, but blind fury. Deception. "It's all a deception," he thought, slamming the table. Ava Sterling, the docile and simple wife he thought he had under control, had dared to deceive him, building an empire behind his back for years. He felt like a clown, an idiot who had been manipulated without realizing it. His pride was shattered. But after the anger came an indescribable confusion. How did she do it? Where did she get the money? Crimson thread? Why had she never mentioned it? He started his own frantic investigation. He didn't dare ask his partners or rich friends. He was ashamed. Admitting that his wife, whom he always boasted of supporting, was infinitely richer than him was an unacceptable humiliation. He resorted to older methods. He opened his agenda and looked for numbers of old college classmates he hadn't spoken to in years. Under the pretense of organizing an alumni reunion, he started asking around. The first call was to the former class president. After the obligatory greetings, he casually mentioned, "Hey, are you still in touch with Ava Sterling? I haven't heard from her lately." "Ava?" The other hesitated. "But you guys got married, right?" "The last time I saw her was at the reunion 5 years ago. Still as beautiful as ever, though quieter. By the way, now that I think about it, you stole the goddess from the entire faculty." Ethan frowned. "Goddess?" The class president laughed. "Don't you remember? Who was Ava Sterling back then? The greatest talent in the fashion design school. Her final project won the national award and was exhibited at the museum. The big firms fought to hire her, offering her a salary we, freshly graduated, couldn't even dream of. We all thought she would become a great designer, maybe internationally famous," the friend continued. "And suddenly, after starting to date you, she rejected everything. She said she wanted to stay home to support you. We all felt terrible for her. Love really blinds people." Upon hanging up, Ethan was petrified in his chair. For the first time in many years, a feeling of guilt broke through his heart. Now he remembered. He remembered the sparkle in her eyes when she talked about her design dreams. He remembered her confidence when she received the award. He had promised to support her, but his own selfishness and ambition had gradually buried her talent and aspirations. He had turned a radiant phoenix into a common sparrow inside a golden cage he had created himself. But that feeling of guilt lasted only a few seconds. It was quickly overshadowed by a stronger, darker emotion: greed and envy. If she was so talented, it was understandable that she had earned that fortune herself. But why had she hidden it from him? A malicious thought formed in his head. She earned that fortune during their marriage. No matter how she had done it, legally it was marital property. She had hidden information from him, she had deceived him, she was the one in the wrong. Ethan's mindset completely changed. He was no longer an unfaithful husband who wanted to divorce quickly to be with his new partner. Now he was a hungry beast, stalking succulent prey. Chelsea and her son faded into the background. His sole objective now was to secure a part, or even the entirety, of Ava Sterling's secret empire. A month later, the Plaza Hotel in New York City shone under the nightlights. Luxury cars paraded past the main entrance. The press, major fashion bloggers, and numerous influential figures from the city's business and art world had gathered there. All attention was focused on a single event: the presentation of the new collection of the Crimson Thread brand in collaboration with the Sterling Center Art Project. Until now, Crimson Thread had always been a name shrouded in mystery. Its products never needed massive advertising. Its fame spread by word of mouth among the elite, like a treasure. It was only known that its founder was a master of silk embroidery, but no one knew her face or true identity. The fact that Crimson Thread decided to collaborate with a major group for the first time and host a public presentation had caused an earthquake in the sector. In the old apartment, Ethan was sitting on the sofa with a gloomy face. Chelsea was trying to soothe little Jake, who wouldn't stop crying. The atmosphere in the house was tense. The divorce was not going as quickly as Ethan had imagined. Ava's attorney, Kara Reed, was relentless, presenting evidence and arguments that left his side completely on the defensive. The investigation into Ava's assets had also reached a dead end. Everything was perfectly shielded. Frustrated, he turned on the television and started flipping channels. Suddenly, he stopped on a finance channel broadcasting a fashion event live. The headline on the screen caught his attention: "Presentation of the Reborn Phoenix Collection by Crimson Thread and the Sterling Group." Crimson Thread. Those two words were like a needle pricking his most sensitive nerve. He stared intently at the screen. The stage was exquisite, the lighting magical. Models paraded in dazzling outfits, adorned with incredibly detailed hand embroidery, especially the image of a fire phoenix that seemed to burn on the black silk. He realized it wasn't just clothing, it was art. The show ended with thunderous applause. The presenter stepped onto the stage, his voice full of excitement. "And now, ladies and gentlemen, the most anticipated moment of the evening. Let's welcome the founder, the soul of the Crimson Thread brand, appearing before the public for the first time. All cameras turned to the side of the stage. The lights concentrated on one spot. Ethan's heart began to beat strangely. He too was curious. Who was really behind that mysterious name? From the darkness emerged a slender figure. When the lights illuminated her, the whole room gasped. The woman wore a silver-white silk dress with a magnolia branch embroidered in shimmering silk thread, exquisite and ethereal. Her hair was pulled back in a high bun, revealing a delicate, serene face that emanated an extraordinary aura. She didn't smile radiantly, she just nodded slightly to the audience, but her eyes shone full of confidence and pride. Ethan was petrified. The glass he was holding fell from his hands and shattered on the floor. The sharp sound could not pull him out of his state of shock. Chelsea turned, startled, and before she could scold him, she too was speechless as she saw the image on the television. The woman who was at the height of fame receiving applause of admiration, the one acclaimed as a design genius, was Ava Sterling. She was not the simple, weak wife they had always despised. She was Crimson Thread. At that moment, an elegant and handsome man stepped onto the stage. He wore a perfectly tailored suit, with an air of nobility and assurance. It was Richard Monroe, the CEO of the Sterling Group. He stood beside Ava, dedicating a look full of respect and admiration to her. They stood side by side, a talented artist and a business magnate. They seemed strangely compatible. That image seen through the television screen was like the sharpest blade, tearing away the last vestige of pride Ethan had left. The next morning, Ethan drove to the mansion where Ava lived. This time his face did not show anger or contempt, but a haggard look. His eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep. He had prepared a new script. He rang the doorbell. The housekeeper, Mrs. Jenkins, opened the door and looked at him coldly. "I'm sorry, Miss Ava is not home." "Please, ma'am," Ethan said in a pleading voice, "just tell Ava that I know I was wrong. I've come to ask for her forgiveness. I'll wait here until she sees me." And he really stood there in front of the gate, under the morning sun that was starting to warm up. He believed that Ava, no matter how tough she was, couldn't be so cruel as to leave her ex-husband out in the heat. He underestimated Ava. Almost an hour later, the heavy iron gate opened, but it wasn't Ava who came out to greet him, but the housekeeper with a glass of water. She left the glass on a pillar of the gate. "Miss Ava says that if Mr. Thorne wants to wait, he should wait, but he shouldn't pass out from sunstroke in front of her house, as it would bother others." With that, she turned and closed the gate. Ethan's face turned purple with rage. That humiliation was worse than insults, but he restrained himself. He knew he couldn't use force, only cunning. Finally, at noon, Ava agreed to receive him in the living room. She sat on a single sofa with a cup of chamomile tea in her hand, as calm as if she were receiving an unexpected guest. As soon as Ethan saw her, his eyes reddened. He quickly approached with the intention of sitting next to her, but her cold gaze stopped him. He had to sit on the sofa opposite. He began his performance with a voice full of regret and pain. "Ava, I'm sorry. I've been thinking a lot lately. I know I'm a bastard who failed you. It was all because that slut, Chelsea Miller, bewitched me. Ava, after all, we have years of marriage behind us. Could you give me a chance to mend my mistakes?" Ava sipped some tea without saying anything, observing his performance in silence. Seeing that she didn't react, Ethan changed the subject. "I saw the presentation last night. You're incredible, Ava. I had no idea you were Crimson Thread. You must have worked very hard. You hid it from me, too. If I had known how talented and hard-working you were, I never would have treated you like this." He started to twist the truth. "Your assets, your brand, it was all built while we were married, right? According to the law, that's considered marital property. Ava, let's not divorce, okay? For old time's sake, withdraw the petition. From now on, I'll be by your side. I'll help you manage the company, grow your career together. We'll build our own empire." Finally, his true colors were revealed. It wasn't regret. It wasn't love. It was bottomless greed for her immense fortune. Ava gently placed the cup on the table. The slight sound startled Ethan. She looked up. and for the first time since he had entered, she looked him directly in the eyes. Her gaze was clear, yet so sharp it seemed to see through his soul. "Ethan, are you finished?" she said slowly, articulating every word. She stood up, went to her desk, and took out a dossier. "First, the Crimson Thread brand was registered, and the company founded by me before we married. It is entirely my separate property. Second, during the marriage, all company income was channeled into a separate account managed by an independent trust. My attorney has all the documents proving the origin and separation of those funds. It has nothing to do with your supposed marital property. Third, the divorce petition. I will never withdraw it." Each of her sentences was a devastating blow to Ethan's plan. He hadn't expected her to be so prepared, so meticulous, leaving him no loophole to exploit. Ava walked to the door and signaled the housekeeper, Mrs. Jenkins. "Escort Mr. Thorne out and ensure this person does not enter here again." Ethan was petrified in the middle of the living room, watching Ava's cold back. The brazenness on his face finally turned into real panic and despair. He realized he had completely lost the game. A few days after the meeting with Richard Monroe, when Ava Sterling was focused on the sketches for the Sterling Center project, the housekeeper entered with a somewhat uncomfortable expression. "Miss Ava, Mrs. Thorne, Mr. Ethan Thorne's mother, is at the door and says she wants to see you." Ava paused for a moment, but the stroke of her pencil did not tremble. She had anticipated this day would come. Knowing her ex-mother-in-law's character and after her identity as Crimson Thread came to light, it was impossible for her to remain idle. She put down the pencil. "Let her in," she said calmly. The housekeeper was a little surprised but obeyed. Ava wanted to settle all matters once and for all. Mrs. Thorne was led into the living room. In total contrast to her arrogant and condescending attitude on the phone the other day, today she looked completely distraught, her gray hair messy, her eyes swollen, her clothes wrinkled. As soon as she saw Ava, she rushed toward her with tear-filled eyes. "Ava, it wasn't me." She tried to grab her hand, but Ava skillfully stepped back to dodge her. "Mrs." Thorne was left with her hand in the air, awkward, and quickly wiped her tears to begin her melodrama. "My daughter, I was wrong. I'm old now, and I can't tell right from wrong. These days I haven't been able to eat or sleep. Remorse is consuming me. I came to ask for your forgiveness." Ava sat silently on a sofa, gesturing for her to sit in the armchair opposite, maintaining a safe distance. She said nothing, waiting to see how far her performance would go. Seeing that Ava did not react, Mrs. Thorne intensified her drama. She began to blame everything on Chelsea Miller. "It's all that slut's fault. She seduced my Ethan. My son has always been a good boy who loved his wife. It was that harpy who trapped him, using the child to tie him down. That's why he made that mistake with you. Daughter, you are the best wife the Thorne family could have. Beautiful, kind, and so talented. I failed you. My son failed you." She cried bitterly and then moved on to pleading. "Ava, for this old woman, for the years of marriage, forgive him this time. What man doesn't make mistakes? If you come back, I promise I'll throw that woman and her son out of the house immediately. I'll make Ethan kneel to ask for your forgiveness." To add more weight to her words, she did not hesitate to disparage the child she had previously called her grandson. "I never wanted that bastard. Who knows if he's Ethan's son or someone else's? I will never accept him as a Thorne family grandson. You are our only daughter-in-law." Hearing this, Ava's calm finally wavered, but not out of compassion, but out of deep disgust. The brazenness and hypocrisy of that woman surpassed her imagination. She looked up, staring directly into Mrs. Thorne's eyes filled with false tears. "Mrs. Thorne, have you finished your performance?" she said in a glacial and distant voice. The word "Mrs." made Mrs. Thorne's smile freeze. That address marked an insurmountable barrier. Ava continued without emotion. "It was you who called me earlier to tell me I should be understanding with your son and your grandson for everyone's sake. Now you sit here insulting them, calling them a slut and a bastard. Don't you find your words contradictory and ridiculous?" Mrs. Thorne's face paled, unable to articulate a word. Ava stood up. Her gaze was completely icy. "My relationship with Ethan Thorne is over. I will never withdraw the divorce petition, and I have no interest in returning to your calculating family. I ask you not to bother me again from now on." She turned to the housekeeper. "Mrs. Jenkins, please escort the guest out." Mrs. Thorne was stunned, unable to believe she was being thrown out in such a humiliating way. She tried to protest, but seeing Ava's determined and cold gaze, the words caught in her throat. She understood that there was no turning back. The housekeeper approached, courteous but firm. "Mrs. Thorne, please, this way." Mrs. Thorne stumbled to her feet and was led out the door, humiliated. The mansion door slammed shut behind her, like a final period to all her vain hopes. From the day he was expelled from Ava's mansion, Ethan Thorne became a different person. He had lost the air of confidence and arrogance of the successful architect and no longer felt like playing the role of the affectionate husband or model father. He spent most of his time locked in his study, ignoring the knocking of a worried Chelsea at the door, surrounded by piles of messy documents, but they weren't architectural blueprints, but information he had gathered about the Crimson Thread brand, about Ava's real estate, about the attorney Kara Reed. The more he investigated, the more desperate he felt. Everything was built like an impregnable, flawless fortress. Impotence turned into irritability, and he began to vent his frustration on everything around him. Little Jake's crying bothered him. The food Chelsea cooked disgusted him. The apartment, once the symbol of his success, now seemed like a suffocating cage. Chelsea, of course, noticed the change. Ethan's tenderness and affection had disappeared, replaced by harsh words and a cold attitude. She felt insecure. Her dream of becoming Mrs. Thorne, the owner of a rich family, seemed increasingly distant. She knew she had to do something to consolidate her position. That night, after putting Jake to bed, Chelsea put on a seductive silk nightgown, poured a glass of red wine, and entered the study. "Honey, don't work so late. It'll hurt you." Ethan didn't look up, only grunted. Chelsea placed the glass on the table, wrapped her arms around his neck from behind, and whispered, "Look, the divorce with her is almost done. How about we go look at places for our wedding this weekend? My father even asked me. He says he wants to give me a big wedding." The word wedding was like a match in the powder keg about to explode inside Ethan. He abruptly pushed her hands away and jumped up, his eyes bloodshot. "Wedding? Are you crazy? How can you think about weddings at a time like this?" Chelsea stepped back, startled, looking offended. "And why not? My son and I need official recognition too, don't we? Or do you intend for us to live forever without legal status?" Ethan let out a bitter laugh full of sarcasm. "Status. You only think about status. Do you know what we've lost? An entire fortune, a life we could have enjoyed forever, and it's all your fault. If it weren't for you and this child, things wouldn't have come to this point." Chelsea was stunned, tears welling up in her eyes. "My fault? Ethan, how can you say that? In San Francisco, who swore eternal love to me? Who said he was fed up with his simplistic wife? And now you blame it all on me?" the argument erupted. For the first time, all their frustrations, calculations, and selfishness were thrown in each other's faces. "If I had known how rich she was, I'd be crazy to have left her for you," Ethan roared. "Do you think I don't know what you're thinking?" she yelled. "You regret not clinging to that gold mine. You despise me because I don't give you the same benefits as her. Ethan Thorne, you're nothing but a gold digger." Smash. Ethan swept the wine glass off the table. It crashed to the floor, and the red wine splashed onto the beige carpet like bloodstains. The atmosphere in the room turned icy. They looked at each other with hostility, like two strangers. The relationship built on betrayal and calculation finally showed its first deep, irreparable crack. They were no longer allies on the same side, but two selfish people trying to save their own interests on a sinking ship. While the outside world was plunged into chaos, Ava Sterling did not care at all. After getting rid of the annoying people, she dedicated all her mind and energy to work. The Sterling Center project demanded enormous creativity and investment, but that only excited her more. However, besides this commercial project, Ava had always harbored another plan, one born from her love for the art of embroidery. In a meeting with the Crimson Thread management team, she officially announced the new project. The large screen in the meeting room showed images of an old town by a river with moss-covered roofs and white walls stained by time. It looked peaceful, but it also conveyed a sense of abandonment. "This is the Blue Ridge Weavers District, a historic textile community outside Asheville, North Carolina," Ava said in a clear, passionate voice. It was formerly one of the most famous centers for silk production and hand embroidery in the country, but with industrialization, the craft has been disappearing. Now only a few elderly artisans remain, clinging to their art, living with great difficulty. She paused, looking at everyone in the room. Crimson thread exists today thanks to the essence of traditional embroidery art. We cannot just receive without giving anything back. That's why I have decided that the company will invest all this year's profits to launch the Reborn Phoenix project. Everyone in the room listened in silence. "We are going to restore the Blue Ridge Weavers District. We will repair the workshops, modernize the equipment, invite master artisans to teach, and open free training classes for the new generations. We will turn this place not only into a production center, but also into a center for cultural preservation and experiential tourism. We will restore the art of silk embroidery to its golden age." Ava's plan was not a business move, but a deep desire. She wanted to use her own strength to protect the cultural values that were being lost. Immediately afterward, information about the project spread in the media. With Crimson Thread's fame, the Reborn Phoenix project received strong support from the public and the government. Everyone praised the initiative as a significant act demonstrating the social responsibility of a major company. The image of Crimson Thread and Ava Sterling grew even greater in the public eye. Ava had no idea that this heartfelt move would unintentionally become a death blow to the plans of Ethan and Chelsea's family. At that moment, in the offices of a construction company, Chelsea's father pounded the table in fury. "Damn that woman, Ava Sterling." In front of him was Ethan with a pale face. They had the economic newspaper in front of them, with the news of the Crimson Thread project on the front page. "Do you know where that Weavers District is?" Chelsea's father hissed. "Right next to the land we went to so much trouble to prepare for expropriation to build our tourist complex. Now the government has approved her cultural preservation project, considering it protected heritage. Our expropriation plan has gone down the drain. All the initial investment is at risk of being lost." A shiver ran down Ethan's spine. That tourist complex was a massive project, his opportunity to relaunch his career after recent failures. He had put all his energy and contacts into it. Chelsea, who was also there, stammered, "Dad, maybe it's just a coincidence." "Coincidence?" Her father laughed bitterly. "How naive you are. In this world, there are no such coincidences. That woman is clearly targeting us. She wants to cut off all our escape routes." Ethan clenched his fists so tightly that the veins stood out on the backs of his hands. He didn't believe it was a coincidence. He believed it was a perfectly calculated revenge on Ava's part. She not only wanted the divorce and her assets, she wanted to completely destroy his career and future. Fear and hatred intertwined, turning into toxic paranoia. He looked at Chelsea suspiciously. "Did she know about this project beforehand?" I don't know," Chelsea stammered. "She played a very dirty card," Ethan roared. "We are completely at her mercy." Ava in her design studio meticulously drew the first details for the future silk village. She had no idea that an act born from her heart had unintentionally pushed those who betrayed her to the brink of the abyss. That move, without any calculation, was the most masterful of all. When it rains, it pours. This phrase had never been so true for Ethan as it was at that moment. While he and Chelsea's family were still looking for a way out for their stalled tourist project, another bomb exploded, annihilating their last hopes. The Trans-Pacific Commerce Tower project in San Francisco, the architectural work that had been his greatest pride, the ticket that had catapulted him to the top, was embroiled in a major scandal. It all started with an anonymous post on an architecture forum, accompanied by detailed images and video analysis. The post announced that the newly completed building was already showing severe cracks in the beam and foundation structure. The author, who identified himself as a civil engineer with a conscience, pointed out that the materials used, especially the steel and cement, had technical specifications far inferior to the standard design. In short, a full-blown embezzlement. The news, which initially circulated only in professional circles, quickly became a media storm thanks to social media. Major newspapers picked up the story. The image of the gleaming skyscraper, the pride of San Francisco, was now associated with terrifying words: poor quality, fraudulent building, time bomb. The developer and Chelsea's father's construction company were immediately investigated by the authorities, and the entire project was halted. As the principal architect, primarily responsible for the design and supervision of the work, Ethan became the target of all criticism. The reputation he had worked so hard to build collapsed overnight. His phone wouldn't stop ringing. Calls from journalists, partners canceling contracts, clients who had purchased commercial spaces in the building demanding compensation. He sat in his study, staring with lost eyes at the sensational headlines on the computer screen. "Impossible, impossible," he murmured. "I put so much effort into that design. I spent so many nights on the site. How could something like this have happened?" Just then, Chelsea's father called. His voice on the other end sounded like the roar of a wounded beast. "Ethan, you scoundrel, what kind of design did you do for this to happen? You've ruined us." Ethan, as if waking up, shouted back, "It's not my fault. My design has no problems. It's your company's fault. You must have changed the materials to steal money." "Don't give me stories," the other laughed bitterly. "Everything was done according to your plans. You are the principal architect. You are responsible." The alliance built on interest had completely broken down. They frantically blamed each other, trying to crawl out of the mud. Upon hanging up, Ethan was panting, trembling. He felt cornered, surrounded by darkness with no way out. Amidst the panic and despair, his mind clung to a single name: Ava Sterling. It had to be her. Toxic paranoia took hold of him. The timing was too perfect. First the tourist complex, now the San Francisco building. Everything related to him was falling apart. It couldn't be a coincidence. She must have hired someone to investigate, find his weak spots, and leak the information to sink him. She wanted revenge. She didn't just want the divorce. She wanted to destroy everything he had, drag him into the mud so he could never get up. That thought, like a poisonous snake, coiled around his heart. He no longer saw Ava as the dignified ex-wife deserving of pity, but as a dangerous enemy, a woman with a twisted, terrifying mind moving the strings from the shadows. His face contorted, distorted by hatred and absolute fear. Ethan's world was engulfed in the storm, but Ava Sterling's life was surprisingly calm. She dedicated most of her time to her design studio or visited libraries and museums in search of material and inspiration for the Sterling Center project. That afternoon, she went to the New York International Hospital. It was not a place she liked to go, but she couldn't avoid it. Mr. Harrison, an elderly master of silk embroidery and her first mentor, was admitted there after suffering a minor stroke. After visiting him in his room, chatting with him, and making sure he was resting, Ava left. On the way to the elevator, she passed the pediatric wing. Her intention was to continue straight, but the inconsolable crying of a child made her steps stop unconsciously. In the waiting room, in front of a consultation room, a familiar figure caught her attention. It was Chelsea Miller. She no longer had the dazzling, haughty look of their first meeting. She wore simple, somewhat worn clothes, and her hair was messy. Her face, without makeup, looked pale and exhausted. In her arms was little Jake. The boy was crying loudly, his face red from a high fever. Chelsea looked completely lost and distressed, rocking the child while constantly looking at the consultation door. Ava stayed in a discreet corner, observing. A complex and difficult-to-describe sensation invaded her. She did not feel gloating or joy at seeing her rival's situation. Seeing Chelsea struggling with her sick child, she no longer saw the image of the hateful mistress, but that of an helpless and worried mother. And that child was completely innocent. His crying had no falsehood or calculation. It was simply the pain of a small body. He did not deserve to suffer the consequences of adult mistakes. A pang of bitterness crossed her. She was not a saint. She could not forgive what they had done to her. But at that moment, seeing the child cry in pain, she couldn't feel hatred. It was a pure compassion that transcended any personal grudge. She had no intention of approaching. She just watched from a distance and then turned to leave. Those matters no longer concerned her. Just as she turned, she bumped into someone. "Excuse me," she said hastily, looking up. The person in front of her surprised her a little. It was Richard Monroe. He also seemed surprised but quickly smiled courteously. "Miss Sterling, what a coincidence." Ava nodded slightly. "Hello, Mr. Monroe. I came to visit a friend of my father," he explained briefly. Then, his perceptive gaze rested on her face. "Are you all right? You don't look well." He didn't look toward where Chelsea was. His attention was focused on her. That delicacy made Ava feel comfortable. She shook her head, trying to force a smile. "It's nothing, just an old memory." Richard didn't ask further. He knew where to stop. He just looked at her deeply and suddenly said something seemingly irrelevant. "Art needs inspiration. Don't let bad memories cloud it." His words were not empty comfort. They were like a reminder from a soulmate, someone who truly understood her inner world. He didn't see her as a woman involved in a divorce, but as an artist whose creative space needed to be protected. A warm current ran through Ava's heart. It had been a long time since she had felt so understood. "Thank you," she said. This time her smile was much more sincere. She said goodbye to him and headed for the elevator. The image of the crying child and the exhausted mother still haunted her, but Richard's words were like a cool breeze, gently dispersing the dark clouds and helping her find inner peace. Her path was art, creation. Old matters had to be left behind. The San Francisco scandal and the stagnation of the tourist project had put Ethan at his limit. However, he still harbored one last hope. In the divorce, he would try to prove that part of Ava's assets were formed during the marriage to obtain some capital and start over. He didn't know that a true tsunami was quietly forming where he least expected it, about to sweep everything away. In Kara Reed Law Office, the atmosphere was one of maximum tension. Her team included not only excellent lawyers but also the best experts in financial investigation and forensic accounting. Initially, their goal was simply to gather evidence of infidelity and clearly define Ava's assets to protect her interests in the divorce. But when investigating Ethan's income further for the division of marital property, an expert on the team discovered an anomaly. The young financial analyst pointed to a complex cash flow diagram on the large screen. "Kara, look at this. This is the official salary and bonuses Ethan Thorne received for the San Francisco project. The figure is high but reasonable. However, tracking transactions related to Chelsea's father's construction company, we found unusual expenses." He zoomed in on a series of transactions. A huge amount of capital from the project had been transferred to several construction material supplier companies. The suspicious thing was that these companies had been created just before the project began. They had no history of activity, and their fiscal addresses were vague. Kara narrowed her eyes. Her professional instinct immediately told her something was wrong. "Continue." The expert nodded. After receiving the money, these phantom companies transferred almost the entirety after deducting a small portion to dozens of different personal accounts through multiple small transactions to avoid drawing attention. "It took us a long time to follow the trail of this money." He paused, took a deep breath, and pointed to a name on the screen. "And finally, a considerable portion of that money ended up in an offshore account. The holder of that account is Ethan Thorne." The entire room fell silent. Everyone understood the seriousness of the matter. It was no longer a simple civil divorce case. It was a case of organized economic crime, embezzlement, misappropriation of funds, money laundering. Any of those crimes was enough to send Ethan and Chelsea's father to jail. Now everything made sense. Ethan's meteoric career, his luxurious life in San Francisco, did not come solely from his talent as an architect. They had been built with illegal money. He was not just an unfaithful husband, he was a criminal. Kara immediately called Ava. She didn't give her the news over the phone, she requested an in-person meeting. In the luxurious living room of the mansion, Ava silently read the documents Kara handed her. The more she read, the colder her face became. She knew Ethan was ambitious, pragmatic, willing to do anything to climb, but she never imagined he could lose all decency, trampling on ethics, profession, and the law in that manner. This betrayal was more painful than his infidelity. It not only stained their love but completely denied the integrity of the person she had once blindly trusted. "Ava," Kara said seriously, "with this evidence, we not only win the divorce, but we can file a direct criminal complaint. The decision is yours." Ava remained silent for a long time, her gaze lost in the window, where the last rays of sun were fading. She was not a person who liked to corner others, but this time the matter was no longer a personal grudge. It affected the safety of an entire building, justice, and the law. She turned to Kara, her gaze now firm. "Kara, do what the law requires. Whoever makes a mistake must assume responsibility." It was the last card, the coup de grace, that would end everything for Ethan Thorne. Ethan received a new letter from Kara Reed's office. This time it was neither a summons nor a proposal for asset division. It was a formal warning alluding to irregular financial transactions related to the San Francisco project, accompanied by a blurred copy of some transfer orders to the offshore account in his name. The letter did not explicitly threaten a complaint, but the intimidation was unequivocal. The moment he saw those figures, Ethan felt the world collapse. A cold sweat ran down his back. His hands trembled uncontrollably. "It's over," he thought. "Ava knows everything. She doesn't just want the money, she wants to put me in jail." Absolute panic nullified his reason. He ran out of his study like a madman looking for Chelsea. He found her in the living room giving little Jake yogurt. Ethan threw the paper onto the table. The noise startled the child, who burst into tears. "What is this? Explain it to me." Chelsea, startled, calmed the child and picked up the paper. As soon as she saw the familiar figures, her face paled. I don't know anything," she stammered, avoiding his gaze. Ethan lost his patience, grabbing her by the shoulders and shaking her, almost shouting, "Don't pretend anymore. How long are you going to fool me? Ava knows everything. She has all the evidence. She's going to report us. We'll go to jail. Do you understand?" The word jail was like a dagger to Chelsea's greatest fear. Her mask of fragility and victimhood finally shattered. She burst into tears, but this time it wasn't an act. It was pure terror. She collapsed, trembling, and confessed, "It was my father's idea. He said the project needed liquidity, that it was only a temporary loan, which we would pay back later." Ethan let out a manic laugh. "A loan? Using phantom companies to transfer money offshore is a loan? And why to my account?" Because you're the principal architect," Chelsea sobbed. "Using your account would justify some expenses. My father said it would be safer. I only did it for our sake." She lifted her tear-drenched face, trying to appeal to his love. "I wanted us to have a solid future, to give Jake the best life. I considered that money ours, the family's. When we get married, my money will be yours too, right?" Instead of comforting him, her words were like a bucket of cold water. He released her, stepping back, looking at her as if for the first time. In an instant, all the loose pieces fit together in his head, forming a complete and terrifying picture. Her appearance in San Francisco, her perfect understanding and tenderness, her unconditional love, it had all been a meticulously calculated farce. He wasn't the lover she adored. He was just a tool, a valuable pawn. His title of principal architect, his signature, and his bank account were what her father and she truly needed. The love he had idealized, the excuse for his own betrayal, turned out to be a deception from the start. Ethan felt a sharp pain in his chest. He couldn't breathe. He had given up a woman who truly loved him, a quiet life, for an illusion created by himself and these scammers. He slumped onto the sofa with empty eyes. He had lost everything: career, reputation, love, and soon probably his freedom. The drama in which he was one of the main actors had finally reached its end, and he was the one who would pay the highest price. The apartment fell into a terrifying silence after the argument. Little Jake's crying had stopped. Chelsea was cradling him in the bedroom, and her sobbing could be heard occasionally. Ethan remained motionless on the sofa, his gaze fixed on the now dry red wine stain on the carpet. He felt like a ship slowly sinking into the depths of the ocean, surrounded only by cold darkness, career, reputation, money, everything slipping through his fingers. And now, Even the supposed love and the new family he had used to justify his betrayal had been revealed as a blatant fraud. He was just a pawn, a tool. Chelsea emerged from the bedroom. Her eyes were swollen, but she had managed to calm down. She knew it was not the time for confrontation. The only way to keep that man was to show vulnerability, use her last weapon. She sat beside him, her voice faint and soft. "Honey, I'm sorry. I was very angry earlier and said things I didn't mean. Don't hold it against me. Now is not the time to argue. We have to find a solution together, right?" Ethan did not respond. Chelsea continued, placing her hand on his, which was icy cold. "No matter what happens, we still have Jake. Our son is small. He needs both of us. For him, let's overcome this together, shall we?" The word son made Ethan's eyelids tremble. He slowly turned to look at the woman beside him. Her face was still beautiful, but to him, it now only reflected a repulsive falsehood. Every word she said had a purpose. He pulled his hand away. His voice was hoarse and cold. "Do you truly love me, or do you just want my principal architect position?" Chelsea froze, looking offended. "What are you saying? Of course I love you." Ethan let out a bitter laugh, a smile sadder than crying. "Me, or what I could offer you and your father." The contempt in his gaze broke Chelsea's last limit of patience. She could no longer pretend. Fear and anger erupted, turning into poisonous, unfiltered words. "And what if I don't love you? And what if I do? Ethan Thorne, look at you. What do you have left now? Your career is over. You have no money, and you're about to go to jail. Do you think you still deserve to be loved?" The argument erupted again, this time more ferociously. They hurled the cruelest words at each other. "If I had known, I would never have allied myself with a woman like you," Ethan roared. "You regret it, don't you?" she shouted, her face contorted with rage. "Do you think I've had a good time? Having to serve a guy like you, and on top of that, having to give you a child? You should feel lucky to have Jake and me." At the climax of her fury, Chelsea blurted out a phrase she would regret her whole life. A seemingly casual phrase, but one that was the death blow to Ethan's last vulnerable point. She laughed bitterly, her tone full of sarcasm. "If it weren't for this child, do you think you'd have any value to us?" A lightning bolt seemed to strike Ethan. The world around him stopped. The shouts, the crying, the sound of breaking objects, everything disappeared. In his head, only Chelsea's last sentence resonated. "If it weren't for this child, do you think you'd have any value to us?" Use value. The child. A terrible suspicion, a thought he had never dared to consider before, sprouted in his mind like a monster. He slowly turned. His gaze no longer showed anger, only a terrifying coldness. He looked toward the bedroom where Jake slept, the child he had boasted about to everyone, his son, the child who bore his last name, his heir. Did he really look like him, or was it just his imagination? Chelsea, seeing his expression, felt a bad premonition. She realized her mistake and tried to correct it. "No, I didn't mean that. I was just angry and spoke without thinking." But Ethan no longer heard her. He stood up silently, without saying a word, went to his study, and locked the door. That night, while Chelsea and the child slept, he stealthily slipped into the bedroom. He did not look at the child with the eyes of a father, but with those of an investigator. Carefully, he collected some fine hairs from the child's pillow and wrapped them in a clean tissue. Then he pulled out a strand of his own hair. He held the two samples in his hand, his heart pounding. He had to know the truth. At any cost, he had to know this final truth. The following days passed in a hellish atmosphere. Ethan and Chelsea didn't exchange a word. He moved around the house like a shadow while she lived in fear, not daring to ask what he had done that night. Ethan spent most of his time in front of the computer, not working, but constantly refreshing his personal email. He was waiting for the final verdict on his tragic life. He had sent the 2 hair samples to a prestigious DNA testing center via anonymous courier service. They promised him the results in 3 business days by email. Every second of waiting was torture. He couldn't sleep. He visibly lost weight. His beard grew uncontrollably. He seemed to have aged 10 years. Occasionally, he unconsciously watched Jake play. He tried to find some familiar trait in the child's face, something that resembled him, but the more he searched, the stranger he seemed. His smile, his gaze, nothing looked like him. On the afternoon of the third day, as he sat absent-mindedly, a new email notification appeared on the screen. Ethan's heart stopped. Sender, Forensic Genetics Center. Subject, DNA test results ref. His hand trembled as he moved the mouse toward the email. He took a deep breath, gathered all his courage, and clicked. There was an attached PDF file. He opened it. The report was presented in a scientific and cold manner, a series of genetic markers, complex technical terms he didn't understand. But he didn't need to understand them. His eyes fixed on the final conclusion, bolded and carefully framed. Analysis and conclusion. Based on the analysis of 24 STR genetic markers, the comparison between the sample of the alleged father, Ethan Thorne, and the sample of the child, Jake Miller, shows discrepancies in 15 genetic loci. According to genetic identification standards, we arrive at the following conclusion. The sample of the alleged father and that of the child do not present a biological father-son relationship. Do not present a biological relationship. Those few words were like a hammer blow to Ethan's head. In that instant, his world shattered. All sounds disappeared. He didn't hear the living room television or Jake's laughter. He only heard the demented roar in his own chest. He had lost his career, his reputation, his money. He had lost the woman who truly loved him, and now he had lost the last thing he clung to, the pride of having a son to continue his lineage. It was all a farce, a perfect play in which he was both the victim and a stupid secondary actor. Not only had they tricked him out of money and love, but they had made him raise another man's child. That humiliation was more painful than the divorce from Ava, more terrible than facing jail. A dry, eerie laugh erupted from his throat. He started laughing louder and louder, more maniacally. He laughed at his own stupidity, at the brazenness of those who had deceived him, at his miserable life. Tears streamed from his eyes, mixing with his wild laughter. He buried his head in the keyboard, his broad shoulders trembling violently. He was once at the top. He had everything, but due to a wrong decision, due to greed and selfishness, he had destroyed everything with his own hands. And now he was left with nothing, absolutely nothing. Ethan Thorne's collapse was faster than anyone could have imagined. After the final shock about the child's paternity, he became an empty shell. He no longer argued or shouted. He kicked Chelsea and the child out of the apartment, not with anger, but with a terrifying silence. He had lost everything. The architectural firm fired him to avoid problems. Former partners turned their backs on him. His friends avoided him. His accounts were frozen. He faced an avalanche of lawsuits from the developer and clients. The luxury apartment was about to be foreclosed by the bank. From being a talented architect at the peak, he plummeted into the abyss, with no safety net. In his darkest, most desperate days, when neither alcohol nor cigarettes could ease his pain, the only image that appeared in his mind was Ava's. Not the Ava of now, the brilliant and unattainable Crimson Thread, but the Ava of the past, the tender and understanding wife who was always by his side in the most difficult moments. She was his last straw. With his last strength, he went to her mansion. He no longer wore expensive suits, just a wrinkled, faded shirt, unkempt pants, several days of beard, messy hair, and sunken, bloodshot eyes. He looked like a beggar. He couldn't even pass the gate. The security guard looked at him with contempt and blocked his way. He had to stand on the other side of the street, waiting in silence, hoping to see her. He waited from morning until nightfall. When the streetlights began to turn on, the familiar black Bentley finally returned. When the car stopped at the gate, he ran toward it. Ava Sterling had just gotten out of the car. Seeing Ethan's state, she showed no surprise, as if she had expected it. Her gaze was calm, without the slightest alteration. The chauffeur and the security guard tried to intervene, but Ava shook her head. She motioned for them to step aside and looked at the man in front of her. "What do you want from me?" Her voice was distant and cold, as if speaking to a complete stranger. That distance broke the last vestige of pride Ethan had left. He looked at her, as beautiful and elegant as ever, and then looked at himself in the reflection of the car. The cruel contrast completely crushed him. He said nothing, simply Slowly and deliberately, he knelt in the middle of the luxurious street, under the yellowish light of the streetlights. The man who was once the personification of pride, for the first time in his life bent the knee. His tears fell. They were no longer fake. They were the tears of a truly defeated man. "Ava, I'm sorry." He began to speak, his voice broken and choked by sobs. "I know it's late, but I truly messed up." He told her everything. How he was used by Chelsea and her father, the illegal dealings, how he blindly believed in a false love, and finally confessed the most painful and humiliating truth. That child is not my son. I've been raising another man's child. Ava, I'm an idiot, a true clown. He raised his tear-soaked face, looking at her with total despair, like a wounded beast begging for mercy. I've lost everything. My career, my reputation, my friends, everything. I'm going to jail. Ava, I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just ask you, for the years we were married, help me this time, just this once, save me. His plea resonated in the silence, pathetic and weak. He had discarded all his dignity with the sole hope of clinging to a ray of hope from the woman he had once mercilessly abandoned. Ava Sterling remained standing there in silence, listening to every confession, every plea from Ethan. The night wind gently stirred her clothes. In her eyes there was no victor's gloating, nor pity for a loser. There was also no trace of hatred, only an extraordinary calm, like the surface of a lake after a storm, flat and crystal clear. The man kneeling at her feet was once her entire world, but now, to her, he was nothing more than a stranger worthy of pity, a faded memory. She spoke slowly, her voice clear and cold, devoid of emotion. "Get up, Ethan." He looked at her, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "Ava, you." But her next sentence annihilated that hope. "Your downfall today is not my doing. I never intended to take revenge on you." She looked him directly in the eyes, her voice clear and articulate. "Everything you are suffering is the consequence of your own greed and your own choices. You chose to betray. You chose the illegal path. You chose to believe in lies. You yourself have destroyed your life. Don't blame anyone else." Ethan was speechless. Her words were not an emotional condemnation, but a cruel, objective truth. She didn't even consider him a worthy rival for revenge. That indifference was more painful than 1,000 insults. But our years together," he stammered. "That relationship," Ava said softly, "ended the day you brought another woman and her son into our home. I won't help you, but I won't harm you either. Let justice handle it. Whoever makes a mistake must assume responsibility." "That is fair." With that, she crossed the gate. The heavy iron door slowly closed with a dry creak, like a blade cutting the last thread that bound them. Ethan remained kneeling on the deserted street, a solitary and pathetic figure. He knew that everything was truly over. A week later, the final hearing of their divorce took place. The atmosphere in the courtroom was solemn and cold. There were no dramatic arguments or tearful accusations. Everything unfolded quickly and orderly. Ava, as the plaintiff, sat with a straight back and a calm face. She wore an elegant beige suit jacket. Ethan, as the defendant, was haggard, his eyes empty, like a puppet whose strings had been cut. When the judge declared that, based on irrefutable evidence, the divorce was granted, Ethan did not react. Ava received the decree from her attorney, signed the necessary documents with firm, decisive strokes. When finished, she stood up and, without looking at Ethan even once, left the room with her attorney. The door opened, flooding the hallway with the bright noon light. Ava narrowed her eyes and took a deep breath of the fresh air. She was completely free. Whatever happened to Ethan from that moment on, the sentences he had to face no longer had anything to do with her. An immense sky opened before her, waiting for her to spread her wings. Justice may be slow, but it is never absent. The fate of Ethan and the Miller family was the clearest proof of this. After the divorce, the evidence of financial crimes gathered by Kara Reed's team was officially handed over to the authorities. A large-scale investigation was initiated. The curtain covering their dirty conspiracies finally fell. Faced with irrefutable evidence, Ethan and Chelsea's father could no longer blame each other. Together, they had created a network of phantom companies, forged contracts, and embezzled a huge amount of funds from the San Francisco project. The press, which had previously praised Ethan, now dedicated itself to exposing all his crimes and those of the Miller family. Their photos appeared on the covers with sensational headlines: "Genius Architect or Super Swindler," "Miller Construction Empire Collapses Due to Greed." Before the court, Ethan completely broke down. He admitted all his crimes, lacking the strength to fight. For embezzlement, money laundering, and offenses against land use planning, he received an exemplary sentence that would bury the best years of his life behind prison bars. Chelsea's father, as the mastermind, faced a similar sentence. The construction company he had built throughout his life declared bankruptcy, and all his assets were seized to pay compensation. As for Chelsea Miller, although she did not directly participate in the crimes, her role as an accomplice, cover-up, and beneficiary did not exempt her from justice. During the investigation, an even more scandalous truth came to light. Her real lover, Jake's biological father, was the construction company's deputy director, a married man. It turned out that Chelsea and her lover had planned everything from the beginning. They took advantage of Ethan's naivety and ambition, turning him into the perfect pawn to cover up their illicit relationship and, at the same time, the tool for their fraudulent business. The love she had professed for Ethan was just a calculated farce. When everything was discovered, her lover fled abroad, leaving her alone to face the consequences. That man's powerful family used their money and influence to disassociate themselves, leaving Chelsea as the sole responsible party. Without money, with her beauty faded, and facing a probation sentence and a huge debt, Chelsea finally paid the price for her intrigues and avarice. Little Jake, having no one to care for him, was placed in a social services center. Meanwhile, Mrs. Thorne, Ethan's mother, upon learning that her only son was going to jail and her assets had evaporated, could not bear the shock. She suffered a severe stroke that left her with half her body paralyzed, condemned to spend her last days in a hospital under the care of nurses. Her dream of having an heir grandson and a rich daughter-in-law to support her vanished, leaving only pain and regret in a cold hospital room. Everyone reaped what they sowed. The spiral of greed, betrayal, and lies finally self-destructed, restoring peace to the innocent. A few months later, when the noise of the case had subsided, Ava Sterling's life had returned completely to its bright and peaceful orbit. She was no longer interested in news about those people. For her, they had become complete strangers, dust that the wind had carried away from her life. She dedicated all her energy to her two major projects, the exhibition space at the Sterling Center and the restoration of the Blue Ridge Weavers District. Under her direction, the Reborn Phoenix project was an unimaginable success. The Weavers District rose from its ashes. The old houses were restored, preserving their original charm. The workshops were modernized. The old looms once again sounded with the clicking of needles. Ava convinced the last master artisans in the town to stay, offering them good salaries and an ideal working environment so they could transmit their nearly lost techniques. She opened free classes that attracted many young people passionate about craftsmanship. The town not only became an exclusive production center for Crimson Thread, but also an attractive destination for cultural tourism. The project not only brought economic benefits, but, most importantly, restored life to a cultural value on the brink of extinction. Crimson Thread's reputation reached a new level, not just a luxury brand, but a brand with conscience and deep human value. The Ava of now had completely transformed. She was no longer the housewife confined to the kitchen, nor the iron woman always on the defensive. She had found the perfect balance in her work. She was a determined leader, a creative artist. Outside of work, she was herself again. She dedicated time to reading, having tea, arranging flowers. She traveled alone to distant places, from the Rockies to the coastal towns of South Carolina, seeking inspiration and enriching her soul. She lived a free and fulfilling life, unattached. She did not seek a new relationship, nor did she fear solitude. She realized that true happiness did not come from a man, but from the fullness and peace of her own spirit. She had found herself, a better, stronger, and happier version than ever. Autumn in Charleston, South Carolina, is as beautiful as a watercolor. The golden leaves of the magnolia trees fall gently onto the old courtyards. The intricate wrought iron arches are reflected in the serene fountains. Ava Sterling was there on a trip that combined supervising an artisan project and seeking inspiration for her next collection. After finishing her work, she treated herself to a quiet afternoon strolling through the historic Battery, one of the most famous waterfront areas in the South. She wore a long sky-blue silk dress, her hair down, and an old analog camera in her hand. She avoided the crowds, choosing the more secluded paths, feeling the delicate harmony between the architecture, the vegetation, and the water. As she stood on a small bridge, watching the colorful fish in a pond, a warm, familiar voice sounded behind her. "If I'm not mistaken, this is how a true artist finds inspiration." Ava turned around. A slight surprise appeared in her eyes. A few steps away, smiling softly, was Richard Monroe. He was not wearing a business suit but a light gray jacket and casual pants. He seemed less like the CEO of a large group and more approachable and relaxed. "Miss Sterling, what a coincidence. Are you in Charleston too?" Richard approached and leaned on the railing beside her. "I have an art boutique hotel project here. I come from time to supervise it and also to escape the hustle of New York. It seems we share hobbies." They said nothing more, simply contemplating the scene in silence. But it was not an uncomfortable silence, quite the opposite. It seemed that both understood and respected the other's space. A moment later, Richard broke the silence. "Your project in the Blue Ridge District. I've heard about it. Very significant work. You are not only a talented artist, but also a person with a big heart." Ava shook her head. "I just do what I think is right. The art of embroidery has given me everything. I had to do something to return the favor to its roots." They began to stroll together through the winding paths and manicured gardens. Their conversation did not revolve around business or million-dollar contracts. They talked about Southern architecture, the meaning of the colorful tiles, how the light and shadow changed over the water throughout the day. Richard possessed a deep knowledge of culture and art. His interpretations were always fresh and fascinating, and Ava, with her artist's eye, saw the subtle beauty, the hidden emotions in every corner that a common person might overlook. They were two kindred spirits who found in the other understanding and a resonance that didn't need many words. Passing by a tapestry room, Richard stopped in front of one depicting a lion, an eagle, and a deer, symbols of nobility and strength. He looked at Ava, his gaze deep and sincere. "Seeing you today, I truly understand the meaning of the word elegance. It doesn't come from designer clothes or expensive jewelry. It comes from the strength after having overcome the storm, from the peace after having let go of resentment. Miss Sterling, I deeply admire you." His words were not empty flirtation. They were recognition, a respect that came from the heart. For the first time, a man saw through her interior and admired her not for being the rich crimson thread, but for simply being Ava Sterling. A warm, soft sensation spread through Ava's heart. She smiled slightly, a truly radiant smile, as clear as the autumn Sunday. "Thank you, Mr. Monroe." They did not talk about the future, nor did they make promises. It was just an afternoon strolling together, sharing thoughts about art and life. But a delicate spark, built on the foundation of understanding and respect, seemed to ignite in the quiet, old atmosphere of the Charleston Gardens. Ava Sterling returned to her New York mansion on a weekend afternoon. The golden light of sunset streamed through the large window, tinting the entire space. She prepared a pot of jasmine tea, its pure aroma filling the room. She stood by the window with the warm cup in her hand, silently contemplating the city skyline. The skyscrapers still stood proudly. Traffic flowed incessantly. New York was still as vibrant and bustling as ever, but the perspective of the observer had completely changed. In her mind, there were no longer images of Ethan or Chelsea. Those people, those stories, had truly become the past, like a nightmare that, although it leaves scars, no longer causes pain. She had learned to forgive not them, but herself to move forward lightly. A fleeting thought of the afternoon in Charleston, of the man with the deep gaze and the kindred soul, drew a slight smile on her lips. It was a beautiful encounter, a future possibility, but she expected nothing and was in no hurry. Her happiness no longer depended on having a man by her side. She put down the cup and went up to the third floor to her private studio. The space was always tidy and quiet. The smell of new silk and sandalwood mingled, creating an atmosphere that soothed her soul. She approached an empty easel where a prepared pearwood frame rested. She did not choose brightly colored silks, but took out a piece of immaculate white silk of the highest quality, as soft and smooth as a baby's skin. With her long, slender hands, she carefully stretched the fabric onto the frame. Every movement was expert and focused. The white fabric became perfectly smooth, without a single wrinkle, like a blank page waiting for a new story to be written. She sat down and opened her box of embroidery threads. Hundreds of silk bobbins of every imaginable shade, neatly arranged and shining under the light. She was in no hurry to choose. She simply observed them in silence as ideas and lines began to form in her mind. What would she embroider on this fabric? A rising fire phoenix, a symbol of her rebirth? A pure white magnolia, a symbol of inner peace? Or a majestic landscape of mountains and rivers, a symbol of her freedom? She didn't know, and she didn't need to decide at that moment. Her life now was like that white fabric. The shape and color the future would take depended entirely on her choice, on her own hands. She chose a bobbin of turquoise blue thread, the color of hope and new beginnings. With agile fingers, she threaded the silver needle. Under the warm yellow light, Ava leaned in with a straight back and a concentrated gaze. She plunged the first stitch into the pure white silk, one stitch and then another, slow, firm, and full of confidence. She was embroidering the tapestry of her own future with her own hands, a future bright, free, and self-determined.